All right, welcome everyone to today's Keptn community meeting, February 17th. I know most of you that are probably watching this from the States, you're watching this later on because today is a holiday in the United States, President's Day, so enjoy the day off. For those that join us live, thanks for joining us live. We have a packed agenda, but we still try to keep it swift. Most of the presentation today will be done by Jürgen, and also Ivar, you are going to enlighten us about the latest and greatest that we have done around enabling Keptn on self-healing, talking about the Unleash integration that we've built. And that's also very great, Ivar, that we have you all the way from Norway with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being invited.
Of course.
Super excited.
And we just learned that it seems in the Nordics, you also kind of escaped winter this year. You went straight into spring.
Yeah, we skipped the winter.
Yeah. But we'll see where this ends up. It definitely doesn't help our skiing skills if we cannot ski anymore, and then we are losing against the people that actually get the snow. I don't even know where the snow comes down these days. I think on the West Coast there's a lot of snow, but yeah. All right, enough with skiing and snow and everything that is weather related. I want to hand it over to you guys, folks that are online. Please, if you have questions, put them into the Q&A feature. You can also use the Slack channel if you want to. I will moderate, and guys, I will try not to interrupt your flow. But in case there's a question that comes in and I feel it makes sense to address it right now, I will stop you and put it over. Otherwise, we'll have dedicated time at the end. Sounds good?
Perfect.
Sounds good. Thank you, Andy.
I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, then also good morning from my side. I want you to walk you through this community meeting, and we have a very packed agenda. And I'm really happy to have Ivar Östhus here in this meeting, and we will talk about feature flags just in a minute. But before, I want to give a big shout out to the Keptn team that just came up with a new Keptn bridge. So we have an early adopter program, let's say. It's available for everyone, where you can exchange the UI of Keptn with its latest and greatest version with the Keptn bridge in the EAP version. So how to do this is pretty easy. It's actually just replacing two artifacts in your Keptn installation. So if you already have Keptn.6 installed and you want to upgrade to the new bridge, it's basically just those two commands. You just want to copy them here and execute it from your local machine that's connected to your Keptn installation. And then you get all the new shiny and bright Keptn bridge. And this is also the bridge we are going to use later on in the demo. So just in case that you don't get confused, we will go into use the new bridge. It looks quite different from the previous version. It has a couple of more features, and yeah, that's the two commands. You can also upgrade your installation to the new bridge. And of course, we're always looking for feedback, so let us know in the Slack workspace, in the channel, that if you upgraded and how you like the new version, and if there's anything you would like to see in the new version as well. So that's pretty cool. One part of Keptn where we are continuously improving, and another part is actually improving capabilities around self-healing. And we did already a great implementation with Unleash, which is a feature flagging framework. And I will invite Ivar to talk a little bit about this. So we are happy to have him here, and he prepared actually some slides for us. So I will give you the stage. I will switch here in presenting mode, and you just let me know when I should continue on to the next slide. So yeah, I'm happy to hear more about Unleash, what it is, and then we will eventually see how it integrates with Keptn.
Perfect. Thank you, Jürgen. Take to the next slide, please. So I cannot tell you everything about feature toggling in like 10 minutes, but I will kind of put it into a context, what it is and why do we need it. So if you go to the next slide, we have this state of DevOps, this Accelerate. Most of you have probably read the book or read this study every year. And they have looked into they have kind of done a survey on a lot of the software companies all over the world. And what I try to figure out is, what do the elite performers do different from the low performers? And when they talk about elite performers, they talk about successful companies that earns a lot of money. It's like Google style companies. What do they do? How do they work? And how does that differentiate from the others? And what I find in this report year after year is that they tend to deploy more often to production. The lead time from commit to deploy is much more frequent, or is much lower. And if they discover error, they're really much faster on fixing those errors, probably because they deploy to production in smaller batches, so much easier to identify the errors, but also that they automated a lot of the process around putting code into production in the first place. But I also find that they actually tend to have less errors when deploying. So this is interesting. So if you go to the next slide, so they identified kind of which techniques and approaches to software development do these elite performers use. Of course, it's about DevOps, of course, and the DevOps practices that we know, like deployment automation, continuous delivery, automated testing. But they also have this trunk-based development as a technique for these elite performers. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, so this is trunk-based development. So I actually assume that most of the attendees here in this webinar knows what this is, but it is a simple technique where everyone works on the same branch, the trunk branch or master branch. You commit small chunks of a new feature on that branch, and you try to have a stable master branch that you typically can deploy to production at any time. And this enables that you have more code sharing, more collaboration on the changes that you are working on. But it also makes it much easier to refactor the mainline, because you don't have all these other feature branches you have to think about. You know that most of the code is already on the master branch. And working in this way also requires you to kind of think of the features you're working on and actually chop them down into smaller pieces that you can integrate with the master branch at all times. But then if you go to the next slide again, this is actually where you need a technique like feature target, because even though it's nice to split up your new feature into smaller chunks, it doesn't always make sense to release those small parts to real users yet. So feature targets is a very simple technique that allow you to kind of hide these unfinished features from your users, but still integrate those onto the main line or the main branch. And of course, this also enables a lot of other cool features, like you can do gradual rollout, or you can do canary releasing. And it also gives you the possibility to have kill switches, where you could have some third-party integration that might be flaky from time to time, and having the ability to turn that off is actually quite powerful. So it's actually about being able to isolate the new feature and have more control on how you expose that feature to your users. So if you go to the next slide. So what is a feature toggle then? It's actually just an if statement in your code, right? And it protects the new functionality from the old functionality. And that's about it. So it's actually a very simple technique, but of course there is more to it. It's more about how do you know which user to enable it for, in which context, on which servers, how many percent of your users. Of course, there is more complexity to it, but the principles are just an if statement. So if you go to the next slide, it's about, so what happens when you use a technique like feature toggles is that you are actually decoupling the process of putting code into an environment from releasing features to your users. And this actually is a way to reduce the risk. There is always risk associated with putting new code into production. You can never take that away, but at least it reduces that risk, because you're not necessarily exposing that new functionality to users before you have tested them yourself yet. So if you go to the next slide, yes, there is downsides. feature toggles by nature is technical debt in your code. You can never get away from that because you have two versions of a functionality probably. You have the old version, you have the new version you're working on. And this increases also the complexity when testing your codes. And if you have a lot of feature toggles going on in the same code base, there is a lot of different variations that you probably haven't thought about testing together. So we should be aware of the downsides of using feature toggles, I think. And also there is another interesting perspective, and that is you might enable the new functionality that you're working on for yourself. But the users might see the old version. So there could be some new bugs that you introduce in the old version when working on the new version that you don't see because you're hiding it from yourself. So you're actually waiting for your users to report those back to you. And this is interesting, I think. So if you go to the next slide, I think there is some things we have to keep in mind. It's like, okay, we should try to actually avoid feature toggles when possible. And what I mean by that is that you can often reduce a new functionality into smaller parts that make sense on their own. And you can release that isolated, so you don't have to have big changes all the time. But you should also look at how you can reduce the duration of a toggle, or how long you keep the toggle around, and try to clean up the toggle when it has served its purpose. Because having the toggle around, and we see this a lot of times with users of Unleash, is that they keep it around just because it was so nice. They invested a lot of time in this new toggle, and they tend to not remove it. And I think that is an anti-pattern, actually. And you should also think about reducing the number of toggle to as few as possible. Usually it makes sense to protect kind of the user interface or where your user are interacting with the new functionality, but you don't necessarily have to also protect backend APIs and stuff like that, because you can just have different parts, or they're all often easier way to serve different versions. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the highlight. What is Unleash? So Unleash is a feature management service, or a feature toggle as a service. It was open source back in January 2015. It's been something I've been working on for quite a few years now. And last year in April, we decided to start this hosted offering. And the hosted is, it's a hosted version of the Unleash open source, but it also adds some extra additional enterprise functionality to it. And we know that the Unleash is been tested in the wild. We have account now for more than 1 million downloads a year on the client SDKs, and we have more than, just the last week is almost 16,000 downloads of the Node SDK. So if you go to the next slide. So I will not go into all the details of Unleash, but I think a conceptual overview on how it works is important. Unleash is comprised of 3 parts. You have the Unleash admin UI, where you actually go in, define your toggles, your rollout strategy, and stuff like that. You have the API, of course, where you integrate. And then you have the client SDK, and this the client SDK that does all the work. This means that the client SDK will synchronize with the API in the background, but they will evaluate locally in your application whether a feature toggle should be enabled or disabled. And this has huge performance benefits because it doesn't have to do synchronous calls back to a random API that might be broken. So it also gives you this reliability characteristics. But it also means that we are we are privacy compliant, because the rules are defined in the service, but they are synchronized back to your application. So you never share your kind of user data with Unleash. It all happens locally in your application. And if you go to the next slide, that would be the last slide for now. These are the core concepts that you should be aware of when integrating with Unleash. And you have the context. This is the information that you provide to the SDK that is kind of the context of the current request. Typically what you put in there is like, who is the current user? What is the user session ID? Or if you do some regional based rollout, could be the country or something like that. And the activation strategies are kind of the rules that is executed inside SDK to decide, given this context, should this feature toggle be enabled or disabled? And that's about it.
Cool.
So,
Thank you so much for this introduction to Unleash.
Just a quick reminder, there's a couple of questions that came in, and because there are, and there's a lot of them actually. So I would like
Nice.
to not kind of sidetrack the rest of the presentation. So I will keep it to the end. But also as a reminder, folks that are online, if you have questions, please put them in either in Zoom or Slack. You can use all the different channels how you can reach us. But there's a lot of interest in.
Yeah, and we can also answer a lot of those probably offline. I would also like to add that there is more slides in this presentation, and we will put a link into the agenda.
Perfect.
So there is also more answer, because we cannot go into all the details in this short webinar.
Perfect. But yeah, I'll have a couple of those later on. Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. We're looking forward. Maybe we can also take some of the questions. During the demo when we maybe have some idle time.
Oh yeah, just let me know if you have some time to
Yes.
wait for things to happen. Then I'll put them in. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. So and thanks, Ivar, for showing us all these details on Unleash. What I want to take now is kind of to see Unleash in action, and also how it works together with Keptn. So first, if you are interested in more details of Unleash, the presentation has more content in it. So you will find all the notes here again in our agenda, which is also shared on our, it's in our Slack channel. You will find it. You will also find it in our community GitHub repository. So you will also find, you will always find the links to the Keptn community meeting notes, and you will find the links to the slides also here. So let us now take a look. How does it actually look, Unleash? And what I have here configured and set up is basically a very simple, maybe it's the hello world of feature toggles, but it's just one feature toggle, very simple. I can only enable it or disable it. And in my case, what I've done is I set up kind of a promotion, which I have a shopping cart service, a microservice for a shopping cart. And what I want to do is at a very specific point in time, I want to be able to enable a promotion, like to add additional items like for free in the shopping cart, or kind of give a discount to the users. But we have implemented this in our demo example via a feature flag, because we want to be very accurate in controlling when we enable this. So in our demo application, actually, we could kind of start here by enabling this. So we just click start here, and maybe you heard it in the background that my Slack notification was coming up. So let me show you. There should be in my Slack actually, because Keptn and Unleash, they are integrated. So I can see now in my configuration that my configuration has changed for the carts microservice in my stock shop. And I can also see what I've just did. I enabled the promotion and I set the value to true. So that's correct. I just clicked on the feature toggle. I just enabled one feature toggle. So that's one great part. You can directly see this in your Slack channels if you have this integration set up. But we will also see this in our new version of the Keptn's Bridge. So just right now, I'm just going to reload this. And we should be able to see the change also in the Keptn's Bridge. So that means that if you have the integration set up between Unleash and Keptn, then you will get all this information directly in Keptn each time you change a configuration. So you don't have to go back to Unleash to see which configuration is right now actually in place, but you can just see this in your Keptn's Bridge. So if we take a look at our stock shop, so we can see this right now. I just did a configuration change, and I will see all the details on the right-hand side. So that's a little bit of the Keptn's Bridge, where on the left-hand side we have like all the changes that happened, like configuration change when we do a new deployment, but also like configuration changes only on one part of the configuration, and we can directly see which stage it affected. So I did a configuration change in production actually, and here on the right-hand side I can see all the details on this. Before I go back to Unleash to take a look what's there in addition, I will just go a little bit into Dynatrace because we have our service monitored here, and we should be able to see here on the items controller. We will also see there was a configuration change. So actually Keptn was forwarding this configuration change from Unleash to Dynatrace. So we can also see that there was now a configuration change done in Unleash, and we set the value to true. So we enabled this promotion, and we can see this here. So first of all, we can see kind of a very tight integration by means of having all these notifications, like the information in all the tools we are connecting, like in Dynatrace, in Slack, of course, in the Keptn's bridge. And everything is done via Keptn with the same mechanism we always do. Like everything is event-based. Keptn is sending out events to the notification service or to Dynatrace, and is capturing these events from Unleash. So we can go back to Unleash, and maybe if I click here, and maybe Ivar, if I can invite you here to talk a little bit about maybe like the strategies or the metrics or whatever part you want to highlight.
Yeah, so we could take the metrics first. So metrics is
Sure.
a very simple tool technique that we have implemented in Unleash. So this is actually data sharing from the client SDK back to Unleash. It's of course optional because of privacy, but the only thing that you see is how often does it evaluate to true or false. And this is really nice to debug that stuff is actually working as you expected. If you do gradual based rollout, it's really nice to see that you actually are evaluating to true sometimes, or that it matches the percentage you're expecting. So it's a simple way to debug that stuff works, that you actually have enabled this new feature for someone. If you go into strategies, this is where you have the activation strategies.
Yeah, sure. I just want to highlight here, like the numbers. So in the background, I'm just adding items to my shopping cart. So I have a load generation up in the background. So this is why the numbers are quite high here. They were just evaluated like in the last hour or whenever we started this. Okay, strategies.
And then strategy. So you have now used the default strategy, and that means it's basically on or off. So if the toggle is enabled, it will be enabled for everyone. But there is other strategies as well. We have gradual rollout strategies. We have user with ID, where you can target specific users. And you can even define your own custom strategies. Then you also have to provide the implementation on the client side, so that you can do a more fancy thing that fits more with what you're doing as a business. Could be that you want specific rules for specific regions or stuff like that. So that's the extension points, basically. We also do audit trail, of course. So we have the history tab, which is basically all the changes that happens to a toggle, so that you can see who changed what when. And this is quite useful if something happens and you don't have the integration together with Keptn. It would be a really nice way to just see what has been changed on this toggle. Or of course, you also have audit trail across all toggles, just to see if something happens at a specific time. You can go back and correlate that with the logs for Unleash. So that's basically it, I guess.
Cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and as said, this kind of integration, like the history or like the audit trail, is also available in Keptn. Just one reminder: if you want to use feature flags, you also have to prepare your application for the feature flags. So in our case, we have a very simple shopping cart, and we have this kind of feature flag and this let's call it a sophisticated if statement, where actually we check for the Unleash server if this feature flag is enabled. So we have our application, our demo application we are using right now, we have it prepared to be able to take the configuration from Unleash, so if it's enabled or not. And basically you will just you want to connect to your Unleash server instance, and you would just then fetch the configuration, and mine is just living here on my Keptn demo cluster, basically. So that's pretty cool. Let us now see what really happened when we updated this feature flag. So in the metrics, we can see like a lot of people in the last hour, 17% of the people, they are now receiving this feature flag, or actually for them it's active. but in the last minute, or actually since we enabled it, it's 100%. So also we should see in Dynatrace that a lot of that we should see what's happening here. And I was just looking at the right-hand side corner, right top corner, because Dynatrace just detected a problem. So let us investigate what is going on in our environment. And actually on the items cards controller, there seems to be now a problem. And Dynatrace actually gives us all the information about this problem, what really is going wrong. And our failure rate was increasing up to 30%. I set it here for a custom threshold of 10%. So whenever we exceed it, I want to get alerted, or actually I want to kick off the Dynatrace root cause analysis and give me a Dynatrace problem ticket. And what I can see here is actually that the configuration change was part of, or is part of this problem. So Dynatrace opened up a problem ticket because since we did this configuration change, the failure rate was going up to 30%. And actually, there is a very simple reason behind it. Because in my demo application, I enabled the feature flag and I put everything like I wrote this if statement. If there is, if we enable this feature flag, if we want to enable the promotional campaign, then there's some other things we do in the code. But actually, the only thing I did is put in there an exception that this functionality is not yet implemented. So of course, we are causing a lot of errors here. And Dynatrace was able to catch this and give us back this information. This configuration change is now the root cause of the problem, because you should just not do this configuration change. You should not enable this. But what we can also see is that Keptn was triggered. Right now, when Dynatrace was opening the problem ticket, Keptn was triggered, and the action Keptn should do is actually to change the feature toggle back to off. So we are asking Keptn here to change the feature toggle and set it back to off. And Keptn responds back with that it finished this feature toggle and has set it to its new state, to its new value, and it's off. So it's disabled. So how can we verify? First of all, we can take a look in the Keptn's bridge. So what we can see here, actually, it's auto reloading. The new version is auto reloading. So we can see a problem was detected, the failure rate increase, and we can see the problem is open. We can see all the details of this problem here, and we can see right afterwards there was a new configuration change in Keptn, captured by Keptn, and it says it's now set to false. So actually, this configuration change, the second one here, this should actually come from Unleash, because that's our integration. So let's take a look in Unleash. And oh, it's already going back. Let me also reload, because then we will see the feature flag now is switched back to disabled. And in the last minute, while I was talking and explaining, we can see in the last minute, none of our users were now affected by this feature flag, or not affected by the feature flag, but they did not get the enabled version of the feature flag. So
if I may add, Jürgen, this is, I think this is so super cool, because even though it's feature flags enables you to turn back off features that proves to be flaky or doesn't work as expected really fast, often much faster than rolling back to the previous version. But again, you still have to detect the problem and respond to it. So there is still this human factor that you have to have proper alerting in place. You have to be sitting right there looking at the alert or getting the alert and figuring out what does this alert mean and do the proper action. But what this does is actually automate that whole process. And I think that's super cool. Then it just becomes much faster and more correct all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not easy to kind of stay ahead of all this complexity, I would say, because now you have, the good thing is that you have deployments and releases decoupled, but now it's also might get difficult to define, okay, if it's not the deployment, it has to be the release. So where's the error? We can see a lot of our users are getting an error. We have to figure this out. So the power of having monitoring and Keptn and like configuration tools or configurations at runtime, everything together actually gives you this possibility to automate on top of it. And I just want to show you real quick the automation part. And actually, I do have it in my public demo repository, because for the user itself, there is no coding involved. So the user doesn't have to be a pro in Java coding, but actually what I did is I added a remediation file to my config repository that's managed by Keptn, and I just added the instructions what Keptn should do. And actually I added the instructions that if there is a failure rate increase for this cards microservice in production, so this is how it's configured, then there is actually an action that should be executed, and it should be that the enable promotion, this feature toggle, should be set to off or disabled. So there is not a lot of coding involved. Actually, there's no coding involved at all, but it's just a matter of configuration. And it could be also you want to have scaling or rollback or other things. But in my case, I just have like a couple of feature toggles, and I just want to provide remediation actions in response. If there's anything going wrong, like with my failure rate increase, I just want to turn this feature toggle off. And I think that's pretty cool and pretty powerful. We can also take a look now in Dynatrace if it actually resolved our problem. So let's take a look back to our cards microservice. Actually, it's green already, so that means the problem is closed. But let me first show you here the events. So the first event, the first one we already investigated. I showed you this. The second event, only a couple of minutes later, is very similar, but now we can see that automatically this enable promotion feature flag was set to false. So it was disabled. And this was now also captured by Keptn, but this was the reason why the failure rate is finally going back. So without any like human intervention, you can now set up feature flags and feature toggles with unleash. But still, you can make sure if anything goes wrong, you just turn them off automatically. So you can make sure you can turn them on maybe Friday afternoon before you go to your weekend, but you're still safe in the sense that if something is wrong with the feature toggle, you can automatically react on this. So Keptn can then automatically call out to unleash and set it back to its previous state, or just turn it off. So that's I think that's a pretty cool thing. And actually, we talked a lot now, so maybe now it's a good time to take some questions. Andy, if we have some questions around feature flags for Ivar or for the demo, we are happy to take them.
Sure. And just as a reminder, if people have more questions, just put them into the QA feature or Slack or however you want to reach me. So there's a couple of things that actually go when they came in the beginning, when you explained feature flagging, a couple of questions on how should we organize feature flags. Also, the first question that came in practice, does this actually mean that if you have a big feature where you have scattered code that belongs to the same feature, that you have the same if statement kind of also scattered across your code base? Is this also what happens in practical life?
In practical life, it all depends, of course, on how you structure code and how you work with it. What we try to advise users of feature flags to do is to try to limit the if statements to one if statement and try to protect it in one place. Usually it is close to the UI. That's where you can branch the different versions, and you can, because it's often easier in the backend code, you can have two different classes or branch the code differently, so it doesn't need to have all these if statements all over. Because that tends to be a mess to clean up. Basically.
So that means the best practice is in the back end you work with versioning of your API endpoints,
exactly.
and in the front end you use the feature toggles to say, am I exposing to the new API or to the old version?
Okay. And also to add to that is that you have the synchronization issue, because if you are doing a microservice architecture, you will never be able to guarantee that the state changes exactly the same time in all services. So if you use the same feature toggle across a lot of services, that
Okay.
would be a nightmare to coordinate.
Yeah, understood. Then that brings me to the next question. You showed the different SDKs that you had, Java, Node, and I think
Yeah.
Node and Go. What about front-end
Yeah.
toggling? What about JavaScript?
Yeah, so we have developed a solution for that. So we I didn't go into details on this. You will find more in the slides or on our web pages. But we think that you shouldn't expose your configuration directly to the front end. So we developed something we called Unleash Proxy for this, and we created a single page or a JavaScript client for that, so that we only expose the evaluated value for a specific user to the browser. And this is because we want to be as secure as possible, not expose internals.
Okay.
And also be super fast. But there is a longer article on why we did it this way on our webpage. Probably easier to just read that, and we can use the rest of the time talking about this.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Then I'm sure there's also a blog post on that, but the question is, what's the strategy behind keeping these flags in my code? How long should they be kept?
Yeah.
Should we clean it up? Are there any best practices to keep it for, let's say, a sprint and then clean it up again? So how do you deal with that?
I think, and this varies a lot from team to team and how they work with code, how long it makes sense for them to keep it around. We actually investigated a lot around this, but so we had access to the feature toggle history for a few hundred applications over almost 5 years. And so we investigated, and what we found is that 50% of the toggles are deleted within the first 50 days. But there is a long tail there. And we found that many toggles actually lived for the whole 5 years. And I think this is an anti-pattern. And my general advice is to try to remove them as soon as you don't need them anymore. But what does that mean? And I think typically when you're kind of satisfied with the new feature and you have enabled it for everyone and had it there for maybe a few days, you should probably clean it up. But it needs to be some part of your practice, and typically you forget about it, you get different priorities, and you run off to new stuff, and you just leave it around.
Okay.
It's technical debt, so you should clean it up.
Yeah, but in the end, I mean, what you're enabling with feature flags is really continuous experimentations, and experiments should run a short period of time, and then you make a decision, completely get rid of it, or expose it to the full world. Yeah. That's great. Then you also showed in the metrics, it seems you only show, at least that's what you see here, how often a feature flag was evaluated in a positive or negative way. Does Unleash have the ability to also measure the impact of a feature flag, like what we've seen in Dynatrace, like the positive or negative impact?
No, not in Unleash itself, but Unleash provide metrics over Prometheus, so you could easily correlate that somewhere else. This is kind of a stand on it right now, at least, that we provide all the data from Unleash, when was a toggle enabled, disabled, stuff like that. But you should probably measure your business KPIs elsewhere.
Okay, and then there's questions. We obviously have a large number of people on the line that are also familiar with Dynatrace, and the question is, can we monitor feature flag usage in Dynatrace? That means, do you already have thought about defining rules in Dynatrace so that when Dynatrace captures individual transactions, we call them pure paths, that we actually know exactly which request had which particular feature flag enabled? So I'm not sure if that already exists or if you thought about that.
I haven't thought much about this, but I think that would be possible.
Yeah.
Because you know when a toggle is changed. So if you can correlate that somehow, but I'm not that familiar with Dynatrace, so it's really hard for me to answer that question.
I guess, well, technically it's easy to do, right? We have a capability in Dynatrace to be called request attributes, where through configuration you say Dynatrace should instrument a certain method. In this case, it would be your SDK.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we can capture the parameter, which in your case seems to be the name of the feature flag, and the return value. So we know on every request which feature flag was enabled or disabled.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. And so we should definitely, besides the Keptn integration, think about that as well. The next question that just comes in is, do you separate feature flags for different stages? So is it possible to say this is a feature flag for pre-prod and a feature flag for prod?
Yeah, this is an enterprise functionality. So part of the hosted offering, we have something we call strategy constraints, where you can do all these kind of things.
Okay, perfect. Then there's another one. It's around the Keptn workflow, and this may also goes to Jürgen or to you. So you showed Jürgen in your demo that you enabled the feature flag in the UI, and that trigger then sent an event to Keptn. Is this the intended way? Is the intention that you turn on a feature flag through the Unleash UI? Or shouldn't this be also more triggered through the same workflow that Keptn has for deploying a new artifact?
Yeah, I think there are like both ways are valuable. So for the Unleash UI, it might be that it's really not so much a tech person maybe just want to enable this feature flag because they know how to use the UI, and Keptn can then still capture this change, or with the Keptn CLI or the Keptn REST API, we could also trigger the change. So this is what Keptn was doing for the remediation part. We use then the Unleash API together with Keptn's internal functionalities to call these APIs. So there are two ways actually on this. I think it just depends on which user is actually using or starting this kind of workflow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see that both options are possible. As you said, some people live more comfortable with your UI, and then they would change it there, and then others may just automate it through the CLI. Then the other thing, I think you answered this already, Jürgen, earlier. There was a question: how does Keptn map the problem to turning off that feature flag? But I think you showed the remediation YAML file. So that
yes, it's exactly the remediation YAML file. So it's basically a mapping between what is the error, what is the problem, and what is the solution to this problem. And maybe I can emphasize here again, like between what is the problem and what I want to change, it does not say like in which state, is it like for pre-production or is it for production? It does not say what, when we talk about what to do, but actually it's how Keptn works, how we kind of organizing our configuration. We will tell here it's in our production environment, and it's for our project sock shop, and it's for our service cards. So this is how we make sure we have maximum reuse of this. First, how Keptn works, but also it works in a way because we want to enable reuse of those artifacts, of those configurations you write. So there's no need to write everything inside the actual remediation YAML, but you just put it in the right place, and Keptn knows what to do.
Also, one more question just come in. Eva, that one goes to you. You mentioned in the architecture that you are pushing the changes out to the individual SDKs, and then how fast does this work? How immediate is there?
So this is a configuration on the client side. So we actually do poll based to make it simple. We just most of the time it's just 3 or 4 headers, nothing changed. But how often you poll is a configuration, so you can configure that as slow as you like. The default is every 15 seconds, but you do whatever you like. You can do every second or even more often on millisecond granularity.
Okay. And I guess that's also the reason why you decided for, instead of going front-end JavaScript, to do like the proxy approach, which also helps you to limit the number of requests that come in from like thousands of users potentially.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Very cool. Let me just, I think I answered. Yeah, there's another question on, I'm sure there's another blog post, test strategies. Do you have any test strategies on how do you actually test feature flags and combinations of feature flags?
Yeah, so for unit test, most of our SDKs has something we call a fake unleash or similar approaches, where you can actually just set a state for the different toggles for the test. So it makes it a bit easier for the unit test. But for integrations test and stuff like that, the usual pattern that we recommend is to test what you expect most users to see in production, because the complexity starts to be very high if you're going to test all the different permutations. You can, of course, do that, but then you get a lot of work for you.
Yeah. Cool. And I think we just, you mentioned a couple of blog posts. We will just add them to the document later on.
Perfect.
Right. I think that's it for now.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Thanks so much for all the questions.
Yeah.
So let's and thanks Ivar also for answering all of the questions.
I love these kind of questions. It's awesome.
So let us move on to the next part. So what was going on the last 2 weeks? Actually, a lot. We have a new integration for Keptn. It's a new SLI provider for Neotis. So Henrik Henrik from Neotis was actually developing this. It's the SLI provider for NeoLoad actually. So what can it do? It's basically a service level indicator provider that can reach out to NeoLoad and fetch all the indicators there, the metrics, and give it back to Keptn for evaluation within the quality gates. So this one is really based on, or like for the Keptn quality gate use case. If you're using NeoLoad for this, make sure you check this out. It's kind of brand new. He just did it a couple of days ago. And you have all the instructions here, how to install it. It's basically just what you want to do is you define your credentials, how to reach out to NeoLoad, and then you just want to run the installer script, which basically installs this integration into your Keptn cluster, Keptn Kubernetes cluster, and then you're good to go. So this is how you can interact with NeoLoad in terms of fetching all the service level indicators from NeoLoad. Next part is we got a shout out from Joe Beta. He is one of the founders of Kubernetes, which makes us really proud. And he was mentioning Keptn on his webcast TGI Kubernetes. So make sure you check this out. Actually, on this link, we jump right into where he mentions Keptn and he talks about it a little bit. It's around the 8-minute mark, and he will talk about like 2-3 minutes that he kind of discovered Keptn. He will talk about a little bit, like he gives his thoughts on Keptn, not in too much detail, but yeah, just make sure you check this out. We are really happy that we are expanding like the community, and we are expanding that our visibility of Keptn. And yeah, Joe Beta, he's one of the founders and one of the main guys in the Kubernetes ecosystem, I would say. And
hey,
talking
Jürgen,
about,
maybe,
yeah, sure.
maybe worth to mention, because Andreas was just asking the question about the SLI provider. Are these things then also going to be shown in one of the community meetings? Yes, they are. And also do us a favor, if you have your own extension, or if you have your own project, we try to keep an eye on what's going on in the community, but a lot of people are doing a lot of things, and not always do we hear about everything. So also please proactively let us know when you're working on something or when you see something, right? As they always say in the States, when you see something, say something. So that means if you see a plugin, if you wrote something, let us know. Happy to give you some airtime. Also, if things like this blog post or the YouTube tutorial, when we don't, if you see a mention, let us know as well. This is always great for us to also keep a collection of references. That's just good for us, obviously.
Yeah, and actually there is a very easy way to let us know, because we just reorganized our Slack workspace, and that means it's now easier to find the right people, to find the right channels in Slack. When you want to interact either with the Keptn dev team, or you want to interact with other peers you're working on some Keptn integration. So in our Keptn Slack workspace, what we have done is basically we removed the number of, or reduced the number of channels a little bit, and we have now, and I think it's here, yeah, we have now a description what each channel should be about. So make sure first, when you enter as a new user, you will get anyway a welcome message, and hopefully you will find it useful to find the right channels. And also here in the channel section, we always make announcements, and one of the latest ones was just how to use the new Keptn Slack workspace, and it's kind of easy. So basically all the questions, every kind of the start of a discussion, you can always start in the Keptn project, and then we either direct you more if it's a more core development issue or it's more an integration issue. We might direct you to another channel. If you really just feel you need some help and it's very clear that you have a question, you can always go to the help channel. And also we discuss the Keptn specification in our dedicated Keptn spec channel. So that's basically a rough overview on how the new structure is. So we reduced the number of channels. We moved most of the people, or actually we moved all the people that have been in previous Slack channels that we archived, we moved them to the new ones that are the replacements. So if you already are a user of the Keptn Slack workspace, no worries. You will find yourself now in the right channels and you can start there. You can just continue with your discussions there. Yeah, I think that's it so far. In the useful link sections, we will also put in the links. We already put in the links to Unleash. We'll also put in the links to the blog posts. Maybe we can have more questions here before we do a little bit of the outlook. I just start with the outlook. If there are more questions, Andy, you can always interrupt me. So in the next community meetings, actually, we want to discuss also the Keptn enhancements proposal. So we got a couple of them. Let's take a look. What is the current one? So if you have if you have a proposal how to enhance Keptn, then you can just go to our Keptn enhancement proposal Git repository, and you just open there and issue a pull request, and you let us know about your proposal for enhancement. So this one is actually about the service level indicators, how this should be improved. Then we will have the next time. Let's make sure we will update the dates if we move our Keptn community meeting. But next time we will have Sohaib from Citrix. He is the original contributor to the Keptn Slack chatbot. So you can actually, with this chatbot, you can interact with Keptn and you can fetch evaluation results, and you can start evaluation of your services directly in Slack. So this is pretty cool when you want to know how your service is behaving. If the service will pass the quality gate, you can then ask Keptn directly via your Slack. So that's pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to this. Then March 16th, we will have Christian from ERT talking about Keptn quality gates with an integration in GitLabs. So without not having Keptn as a full installation, but having like the smaller installation with a smaller footprint of Keptn, and then using the Keptn quality gates in GitLabs. This will something Christian will talk about, and then Henrik will provide more information on the SLI provider from Neotis for NeoLoad end of March. So we are really looking forward to see all those folks presenting here in the community meeting. And then if you want to know more about Keptn, and maybe you're around in one of the cities like San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, Vienna, or in the Benelux area or in London, then make sure you just stop by, and we will be talking about Keptn and how to use Keptn for different use cases, like for enforcing your SRE processes and your quality gates, to have your self-healing in place, and also your continuous delivery. So yeah, that's going on the Keptn side the next few weeks. We are pretty much looking forward to this.
Yeah, there's two quick questions, and I think they can both be answered by opening up the Keptn's website. The first one is, how can we run Keptn only on a full-blown Kubernetes cluster, or is it also possible on something lighter weight? And if you go to the docs, I think there's documentation now under the install section on installing Keptn on Minikube.
Here we
Exactly.
go.
Yeah. So make sure, right, folks? I know a lot of people have been asking for this. And then the other question is around the Keptn's bridge. Again, you had the link already in the document, but how do we get the latest Keptn's Bridge, this early access preview? And I believe it's also
here on the website.
Exactly.
You go to the reference section, and there is the Keptn's Bridge here.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very bottom, you will find the early access version of the Keptn's Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And this is regularly updated. So actually, we already updated this once or twice with the new version.
Mm-hmm. And it also, if you look at the links on the left side under the Keptn's Bridge, you also see Keptn on micro Kubernetes experimental. There's a lot of things we're playing around, and we also try to, thanks to the team, document all these steps. So check this out. All right.
Cool.
I think we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
I think that's the end of the questions.
So thank you, Ivar. Thanks so much for being part of this Keptn community meeting. I'm really looking forward to see more from Unleash, and I'm really happy for this Unleash integration with Keptn, because I think that's a very, very strong use case. And although Unleash is very easy to use and Keptn is easy to use, it just like if you have more feature toggles, you have a lot of complexity, and this just makes it very easy, and like it's kind of a safety net when you want to change your feature toggles in production, and Keptn can make sure that you don't you don't break the great experience for your end users.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks to the whole Keptn community for being part of this.
And Ivar, I will follow up with you on the Dynatrace specific question, because I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do.
Yeah, please do. Okay.
Okay, then thanks so much. See you in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, reach out to us via our Slack channel. And then, yeah, see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.